Let's give a warm welcome to Dr. Mark Allan Powell.
Okay, so the basic field is what is called historical Jesus studies, and that would be about, I don't know, 1 or 2% of all the books that are written about Jesus. Most books that are written about Jesus are interested in Jesus, who is an object of faith and worship. Jesus, the Son of God. Jesus, who sits at the right hand of God in glory. Jesus, who lives in your heart as your personal Lord and Savior. Jesus, who some people believe that they receive his body and blood when they take communion. They have this. Historians no interest at all in that Jesus. So maybe they're Christians, and they have that as piety of faith. But historians are interested in the man named Jesus who lived for a few years in Galilee about 2,000 years ago. And the same way, in almost exactly the same way, should they be interested in Caesar Augustus or Alexander the Great or Napoleon Bonaparte or whoever. Indeed, the majority of historians who are interested in Jesus as a historical figure are not Christians. Many of them are not Westerners or North Americans. They're just he was an important and interesting man. So they want to study. If anything, the surprise would be why there isn't far more work on Jesus as a historical figure, because almost all historians will agree that Jesus was, he'd be in the top 10 of the most important people who ever lived in terms of his influence on world history. But there's been nowhere near as much done on Jesus as done on Alexander the Great. I never met a historian who would think Jesus has had far greater impact on the world than Alexander the Great did. And I'd say, well, why? Well, because they really don't want to get into religion. And if you write a book about, if a historian writes a book about Jesus as a historical figure, first of all, a lot of religious people will get mad, and you don't necessarily want to God be mad at you, and other people will not understand it, and your colleagues in the history department will suspect you of being some kind of a sneaky Christian trying to evangelize people when you want to teach a class about Jesus or something. So they just. But that's the field, and I've worked somewhat in that field. I've not done so much work in the field myself as I have observed others. So I have chaired for, not right now, for about 15 years, I chaired the Society of Jesus Historians in the United States, which would sound like I'm the top Jesus historian in America, but no. They actually wanted me to chair because I wasn't a very prominent Jesus historian. I was just interested in the field. That way I didn't take sides on matters that were controversial. I didn't have strong opinions. I could be kind of neutral. But I did write a book about it called Jesus as a Figure in History. And it would be I don't think it has any competition. I don't know of another book that would compete with it. It's the standard textbook at any university, college that has a class on it. It might be used in a religion class. I think more often it's just used in the classics department. If you're studying history of the Roman Empire or something, sometimes my book gets assigned. Usually as not as a main text, but as also recommended or something like that. Or history of Judaism classes, history of Judaism textbook, because the Jews do consider Jesus to have been a famous and important Jew. So, indeed, they would say no other Jew has had as much impact on the history of humanity as Jesus from Nazareth. So that's the background. Given that field, that historical Jesus studies is only a tiny little bit, tiny sliver of interest in Jesus worldwide. More specific topic is Jesus, the politics of Jesus. Because even within historical Jesus studies, the traditional view has been to view Jesus as a religious teacher, as a moral teacher, as the founder of a religion. And in those ways, they might have compared Jesus to some Confucius or other prominent religious figures, and he would belong kind of to the history of religion. But there have always been a few scholars, and I would say from about 1990 to the present, there has been strong emphasis on Jesus as a political figure and on the politics of Jesus. And in the field today of historical Jesus studies, I think just about everyone agrees now that whether the categories might be somewhat anachronistic. If you had asked Jesus, are you a teacher? Are you a religious leader or a political leader? I doubt he would have understood the question. But he certainly was interested in what we call politics. And a great deal of what he said and did concerned with what we call politics. And indeed, historians are saying they are now saying things like Jesus had more influence on politics than most figures in history. You would be hard pressed to come up with a long list of names of world leaders who were more influential on politics than Jesus. So the question is, why? How come? At first, it may seem a little odd because he didn't run for office. He didn't have an army. He almost never even mentioned or commented on people who were in office. He didn't talk very much about Herod or Pilate or Caesar or whoever the leaders were. And the things he did say often seemed to indicate that it almost like it didn't make any difference who they were. And he almost seemed to indicate that, well, just kind of ignore them. Is it lawful to pay taxes to Caesar or not? And he said, well, whose face is on the coin? Caesar's? Give Caesar what's Caesar's. The coins belong to Caesar. He minted the coins, give them back to him. As if those coins just belong to some kind of a worldly economy that isn't ultimately what you should be concerned about anyway. So Caesar wants to take all your money. I didn't have it. How valuable is money, really? Many people, including me, would kind of think, that sounds a little naive, Jesus. So he makes some little comments like that. It almost seems like he's not at all interested in politics. So politics just doesn't matter, which is indeed what some people thought for a time. That Jesus was just sort of apolitical. And if you had asked Jesus, this is of course anachronistic, they're saying, if we would ask, so who would Jesus vote for? This has been said for some decades now, every election. Hillary Clinton or Donald Trump, who would Jesus vote for? The standard answer historians have given is Jesus would not vote. He wouldn't vote. He would have nothing to do with the electoral process. He would think it was irrelevant and didn't matter. So I'm not sure that they would still say that. People have come now and think Jesus was a bit more politically involved and astute than perhaps we have often assumed. But that's been usually sort of the general view. But no one has ever doubted that Jesus was very interested in justice and in what we think of would be certain political issues, that Jesus is interested in how people are treated. And it would be very difficult to be truly concerned with how poor, marginalized, vulnerable people of the world are being treated and be completely apolitical. So that's laying out kind of questions before us. So now I'm going to share some things about, in a nutshell, where historians are currently kind of placing Jesus. I'm just going to stop for a moment. We're going to have more time for questions later, but just on what I've said thus far. Anybody got anything you want to say? Comments, questions, or maybe something that just occurs to you? Maybe a story about Jesus you remember or something. Yes?
You know this, but N.T. Wright looks at the comment about render unto Caesar what is Caesar's, not as like this sort of blithe off-putting Caesar, but rather as an accusation against the Pharisees that they have been honoring Caesar with the coins that have the description of Caesar being the Son of God.
Because Jesus was had the coin.
Yeah.
Yes, them.
And so when he says, give to Caesar what he deserves, the like undercurrent of it is actually like, and you know what he deserves, which is for you to give him no allegiance whatsoever in any way. Like, so is that actually how you look at that, or do you think that it's reading?
He's actually following. He's following that.
Well, there's a Maccabean quote where the one of the fathers says to his sons, "Pay back the Gentiles in full," and he thinks Jesus is referencing that quote.
Yes, right. Again, on many of these matters, I'm famous for not having opinions, for describing what different people think. I would say possible, hasn't carried the day.
Okay, all right.
It hasn't carried the day. More often, people would think that he's saying that he's saying Caesar, if Caesar is only, Caesar has the power to take your money away from you, and he doesn't say that's okay, or he doesn't say that's a good thing. He just recognizes that, and he does not. So Jesus is not encouraging revolution or rebellion. N.T. Wright agrees with that completely.
Sure,
He's not encouraging rebellion or revolution.
It's a different kind of.
So he's saying the soldiers are going to come and demand coins from you. Give me the coins.
Okay.
Coins aren't really what life is about anymore. And some other people, not N.T. Wright, will pick up on the image language, because as any good Jew would know, human beings, male and female alike, are made in the image of God. And so the coin is made in the image of Caesar. So what Jesus is saying here is he's saying, give Caesar what is made in the image of Caesar, and give to God what is made in the image of God. And a Jewish person wouldn't understand that as saying, so Caesar made this coin and stamped his image on it, Caesar can have it. But I have been made in the image of God, and God's image is stamped on me, and Caesar can never have me. Saying something of that nature. But, all right, move on to the culture. Because some of the question is indeed here, what Jesus could do. Jesus was in many ways a powerless peasant. Now, some people think, well, he could do all kinds of wonderful miracles and all that. And if you want to go that route, then indeed it does end up with some questions, some somewhat unresolvable questions about that theologians have puzzled over for years. So if Jesus had all these superpowers, why didn't he just overthrow the Roman Empire, or make all the evil people stop doing evil things or something like that, but he clearly wasn't about that. He wasn't going to call down fire from heaven, to nuke them or whatever. We're called 12,000 angels. There's one verse in Matthew where Jesus said, "Do you not know that if I wanted to, I could but say the word, and the Father, God, would send 12,000 angels to fight on my behalf." That's when they sent a little group of soldiers out to get me. They're not saying, if I wanted to. I just wave my hand. But Jesus is not, so he's not going to use all his amazing, miraculous powers. He's a powerless peasant. And he is not actually, historians start with the point that he does not have the power or the authority or the ability to transform Roman society in the way that a revolution would typically try to do. And when they look at Jesus, they will class him. First, I'm going to do the basic thing and then more specific. Basically, they would class him as a social revolutionary, which is distinct from a political revolutionary. A political revolutionary tries to change the nation, the society, from the top down. You overthrow the king, coup d'etat. So there's a corrupt ruler. If you get rid of the corrupt ruler and replace another ruler, then everything will be the way you want it to be. Regime change. That's political revolutionary. And history is filled with political revolutionaries. Indeed, in the history books, you learn all these names of generals and emperors and conquistadors and people who conquered and seized power. But generally, the rule, what history says, is that these things do not have great impact on world history long term. As the Who said, meet the new boss, same as the old boss. So you replace one tyrant with another tyrant. And maybe every now and then a good one even slips in. And maybe for a few years you have a benign despot, but when that despot's gone, another one takes its place. So a social revolutionary tries to change society from the bottom up. It does not try to overthrow the person at the top, but tries to change the people at the bottom, because which is, they would say, exponentially more difficult, so that very few people in history have ever been able to do it. But exponentially far more difficult, but also more long-lasting. Indeed, usually permanent. When a social revolutionary is successful, it changes their society forever. And the book that I read on this said they had a list of social revolutionaries, and it said, you'll note that they all have one thing in common. They were all killed for their cause. They were all murderers. So it wouldn't necessarily have to be. And they list Gandhi as a social revolutionary. Gandhi did not try to overthrow, it was the British colonial power or whatever like that. Gandhi effected a social revolution of the people at grassroots bottom level, such that the colonial powers were no longer able to rule them, and they eventually had to withdraw. And another obvious would be Martin Luther King Jr. Martin Luther King Jr. did not run for president. He could have gotten elected anyway, or did not even try. He did not primarily. I mean, he'd meet with the president and talk to him, and he'd meet with senators, and he might give his endorsement of a bill or something, but he didn't actually do a lot of that. Mostly what he did is he changed the way American people thought. He changed their values. He changed the way they thought. So I don't want to spend the whole time on him, but I grew up in the South. At that time, it was very segregated. And I want to say I should be embarrassed, but I don't even think I am. Why should I be embarrassed by it? You grow up in a world, the world just is the way you grow up. You're growing up in a world and you're going to school, and there's boys' bathrooms and girls' bathrooms, and you're told to start kindergarten, the boys go to the boys' bathroom, and the girls go to the girls' bathroom. And if you saw a girl, going into the boys' bathroom, you'd go, you'd run and tell the teacher or something, Molly went to the boys' bathroom. You're not supposed to, because the world isn't supposed to work that way. So I grew up in a world where you had bathrooms for whites, and there were outhouses out back for color. The school I went to, had restrooms, gas stations. Anytime you go to any gas station, there were restrooms, and then there was like a porta potty out back with a sign on it that said color. And if you went into Woolworths or whatever, they'd have two water fountains. They had the water fountain that said white something, and another little water fountain next to it that said color. Now, if I had seen an African American drink out of the white soda fountain or something, I would have thought that was horrible. Because that's just, they're not supposed to. Because you grow up in a world that's organized a certain way, and you assume that the world is organized the way it's supposed to be, unless somebody deconstructs that for you. And Martin Luther King Jr. came along about the time I was maybe 10 years old, and deconstructed that world, such that in maybe about a 3 to at least a 5-year period, I don't know that there was anybody who I knew who thought that was okay anymore. We're talking rural South. So really, we went from a year when nobody questioned it. I'm sure African Americans questioned it, but people did not question that kind of segregation. 5 years later, nobody thought that was okay. So he changed, Martin Luther King changed the way people thought. So that's what Jesus did. Jesus, in fact, they will say Jesus was the greatest of all the social revolutionaries. Jesus changed the way people thought. So that almost, historians will say, almost everyone in the Western world today, and they'll even talk some about parts of the East or whatever, just say the Western world today, almost everybody thinks differently than they would if not for Jesus. It's not just the Christians. People think differently, specifically with regard to values. And above all, the value of honor and shame. They talk about the world in which Jesus lived being a culture of honor and shame. People call it cultural anthropologists studies. And they say, in any culture, including ours, people prefer to be honored than being shamed. Nobody likes to be shamed, and everybody wants honor. But we're not an honor and shame culture, because it is not our defining primary value. In the world in which Jesus lived, honor and shame was more important than anything else, including life itself. It was more important than anything. So I want to try to get some examples of that. One example would be, in America today, most people would like to be rich. When I grew up, I think it was the same year, might have been 2 years apart, but I remember listening on the radio at the same time to the Beatles singing, "I don't care too much for money, money can't buy me love." And also to Tevye singing, "If I were a rich man," how great and wonderful life would be. And I love both songs, and it never occurred to me that they were kind of two different, which was, I think, because I thought, and probably still believe actually, that I don't really care that much for money, because money can't buy me love. Love is more important than money. But I sure would like to have more of it. do I care that much about? Oh, why would I like to have more money? Because I could buy cool stuff. Most people in America want money because, for at least a couple of reasons. Probably number one, luxury, being able to buy things, being able to have things. We want things, and money is how you get things. We want a better, nicer car, nicer house, get a new iPad every year, whatever. We want things. Or we want money because money can bring power, and we want power. So control people. But in the world in which Jesus lived, the reason people wanted money is because it was honorable to be rich and to have money, and it was shameful to be poor. If you were able to get enough money, and so every now and then would happen, if somebody got money in a way that brought shame, it did not make it wasn't worth it. They didn't care. It didn't make any difference. It didn't make any difference how many nice things they could buy or whatever else they could do. The shame was not worth it. Honor and shame was most important. I have a couple of examples that are in the modern day. And it was exponentially more true in the first century. But we'll take groups over to Israel now, Israel-Palestinian territories, to Jerusalem. And there's a marketplace, and you get souvenirs and stuff.
I did, but it's Paul trip instead.
So, and we'll tell the people a little bit about bargaining now. You're going to these shops, are all Palestinians owning the shops. And the Palestinians owning these shops and selling all kinds of handicrafts and things like that. And first thing you know is you always, it's traditional, you bargain, you negotiate. You're not going to pay. You ask for something that costs, it tells you what it costs. You're not expected to pay that. But how you bargain is extremely important. Because if this person, say you walk in something, you pick something up, and you think, how much is this? He says, that's $10. And you say, $10? It's not worth $10. I'll give you $5. He will turn his back on you and will not speak to you again. Even if you say, hey, all right, I'll give you $10. Because you have insulted him. You said that the thing that he is selling in his store is not worth what he said it was. What he said that was worth. And his honor, he is very poor, but his honor means more to him than your money. He won't talk to you. He won't sell it to you. You could offer him $20. So what you do is, it's almost like a game. It seems silly to the Americans. You're like, because how much is this? It's $10. Oh, gosh, it's really nice. I would really like to have it, but I don't think I could afford $10. Can you help me out? And they'll say, oh, for you, how about $5? $5. Thank you. You're very generous. And then you give him $5, and you walk out, and he sells them for $5. Not to him, but that's how you do it, because his honor is more important to him than money. Honor. I heard at the time of the Iraqi War, when a couple presidents ago, we were going to effect regime change in Iraq or something. I saw Bill Maher. You know who Bill Maher is? I saw Bill Maher on TV, and he made a comment that was, it's a little crass, but he had a point. I got it. Where he was talking about how Bush changing don't understand the Iraqi people. Part of the problem, because we're going to be greeted as liberators. That's the line. We're going to be greeted by liberators. They think that American values are what are important. So Bill Maher says we'll be treated by liberators. See, because Americans, what we value is civil liberty. Probably future cultural anthropologists will probably say that what Americans valued more than anything else was privacy and personal liberty. Freedom of speech, freedom of press, freedom of religion, the Bill of Rights, and privacy. It's nobody else's business, what I'm doing. There's never been a society on the face of the planet that has had the level of personal liberty and privacy that we have in the United States, and that's because we value it so much. So we assume Iraqis value that too. But you know what? The average Iraqi would give all that up. If you ask him, do you want freedom of speech? Do you want to say anything you want anytime you like? Sure. Sounds nice. Freedom of the press, newspapers can just print anything you want. Yeah, that might be interesting. You want all these things? Whole Bill of Rights? You want all this? Sure, yeah, why? So, but it's not that they're against it. But the average Iraqi would throw out the Bill of Rights in a heartbeat if he thought it meant that someday his sister might walk down the street in a miniskirt. That's Bill Maher's comment. So, what does he mean by that? He says that would bring shame upon his family and upon him. And if getting the Bill of Rights and civil liberties means you can't control your women and how they dress, then we don't want it. Because the whole point of controlling women is so they don't bring shame upon family. Because it's an honor and shame culture. And I think it's very hard for us to wrap our heads around that in any kind of meaningful way. And it might make the Iraqi people, I think, it kind of puts them in a bad light. I get that. But there's a point there. So they value honor and shame over personal liberties. So, with those examples from the 21st century, 20th, 21st century, the world of Jesus was far more profound an honor-shame culture than any culture even today. And it was honorable to be powerful and to be wealthy, and it was shameful to be poor and vulnerable or weak. So reason people wanted to be rich and to be landowners so that they could have this honor. So what Jesus did was he changed the value system by reversing those polarities. Jesus taught and started a movement that ended up, I mean, if you did, on paper, this would have looked ridiculous and stupid. He could have drawn it. He said, I have an idea. And called 12 people together and said, how about if we just say from now on, it's honorable to be poor, and it's shameful to be rich. And all the people who are rich are living in shame. But all the people who are poor are honored. Yeah, cool. That's a great idea. That's something that would work on South Park or something. But how would it actually work in reality? But the incredible, amazing thing is, I don't know how well thought out it was as a plan, but it actually worked. Jesus was able to transform the values of honor and shame within that culture, within a relatively short period of time. And then as the movement was spread throughout the Roman Empire, within 100 years, it had spread throughout the entire empire. So that now, people who were wealthy were actually embarrassed and ashamed of being wealthy. They were on the defensive. And the only way they could alleviate that was by doing charitable things or whatever with their money. They had to be visibly giving money away or doing things with their money so that people would say, even though he's rich, because normally a rich person, would just be completely disgraceful to be a rich person. But this rich person isn't completely disgraceful because, he or even sometimes she does, some worthwhile things with her. But even more important, probably, was it became honorable to be poor and to be vulnerable. So Jesus literally honored slaves above masters. and said that it was more honorable to be a slave than to be a slave owner. That probably doesn't strike us as shocking. But what do you think? Do you think it's more honorable to be a slave or to be a slave owner? Slave, slave owner. Which is honorable, which is shameful? If you think to be a slave may be honorable, to be a slave owner is shameful, you probably think that because of Jesus. So, I mean, if it hadn't been Jesus, it might have been somebody else. But in the time stream that we live in, I don't know about alternative universes and stuff. There might have been somebody other than Jesus that did it in some other dimension. But in the world that we're living in, it was Jesus who had that impact on human history. So we think now, you can help me think of things that Jesus said, like that. See if you remember any Jesus quotes. I don't know who you all are, so some of you possibly don't know any Jesus quotes at all. But a couple of you might know one or two. What were things Jesus said? Reversing the polarities.
Blessed are those who are persecuted.
Yeah, blessed are those who are persecuted. But the whole Beatitudes. Blessed are the poor in spirit. Blessed are the meek. Meek, another word for meek, which I would use if I were doing a Bible translation, oppressed. Blessed are the oppressed. That's what the word means. The word meek in English sometimes means like timid or soft spoken. But that Greek word means is oppressed. Promise. Blessed are the oppressed. Poor in spirit. Blessed are the persecuted. He said, his disciples asked, we're having a dispute over which of them was the greatest. And so Jesus called them all together, and then he goes and gets a little child, and he brings a little object lesson, and brings a little child, and has a little child standing in front of them. And he said, in the new order that he is bringing, that he is establishing, this little child is the greatest of them all. People have read that. I don't know, Sunday school teachers have said, well, because children are so sweet and innocent or something. Usually these are Sunday school teachers who have never had kids. Or because, I don't know, they come over, why is the little child, because the little child is completely powerless and vulnerable. So the powerless and vulnerable people are the greatest. Another time he says to them, now I'm coming on Jesus quotes. You can give me more. Anybody else? More Jesus
I was the story of the Good Samaritan.
Yeah, the Good Samaritan is another one. We know that story, right? The Good Samaritan. So the man who is honored, the priest and the Levite, do something shameful. Everybody hear that story. They're the people you boo and hiss. These are the most prominent religious leaders of the day. The Samaritan is a person that everybody hates, who does what is honorable. And the story began with a powerful person, a teacher of the law, I might say a seminary professor, Bible professor, coming to Jesus and asking him questions. What is required of him? Jesus says, love your neighbor, love God, love your neighbor as yourself. Oh, well, but who is my neighbor? Who is my neighbor? And then Jesus tells him this story. And by the end of the story, Jesus has to ask him, which of these three should be your model? The model that you would try to follow. And he forces this person to admit. In fact, he can't even say this. He says, the one who
does the good thing.
You can't even say the Samaritan, the one who helped the guy. That's it. So that's the person you take as your model. That's if you want honor, that's the person you follow. Another time he says to his disciples, you know how it is among the Gentiles, that's the Romans, how their great ones lord over others, and they have tyrants that rule over other people. But it will not be so among you. among people who are the new order that I'm establishing. In this new order I'm establishing, he says, the one who is deemed greatest will be the one who is the slave of others. Not the tyrant, the king, the slave of others. If you want to be first, you'll have to make yourself last. On and on and on. Lots of the Jesus quotes start falling in line, start seeing these things. Parables he told, and all these different things. We're in homey ways, with little proverbs, with cute little stories, some of which still hold up really well, and some of them, I think they all probably worked really well in his day. They all worked as well. It's amazing any of them still work 2,000 years later on the other side of the world. But he actually managed to change people's value system so that people believed that it was honorable to be poor. Now, part of what I would say on that is that, because I don't need to, I feel no need from a historical perspective to try and defend Jesus or make him into the greatest guy ever or something, is we just think, well, why didn't he do more than that? It doesn't seem like he actually did all that much. It doesn't seem like poor people were any better off after Jesus was crucified than they had been before. None of the structures of society had changed. The rich and the powerful were still rich and powerful, and the poor were still poor and hungry, and nothing had changed. But historians and people who study politics specifically are now looking afresh at Jesus and saying, and it appeared as though nothing had changed, but at another level, everything had changed. That people now thought differently about poverty and wealth and about worldly power. And they actually they now thought that the widows and the orphans and the poor and these people had the greatest honor. And they no longer looked upon all the wealthy landowners and all those people as honorable people. And that, I'm trying to find a way to say it, that hit the wealthy landowners where it hurt them. It hurt them more than losing their money or losing their land. Because what they wanted most was honor. And Jesus took that away from them. He didn't take their money away from them, but he took away what their money got them. What their money got them was honor. And they didn't have honor anymore. That's what they call it, a social revolution. Indeed, some of the mysteries historians are still trying to sort out is how it spread so quickly and how it spread so fast. But indeed it did. And they would then the question would be, but has it really changed? Does it really affect anything today? I don't ultimately know, but I would say it's unimaginable today that you could have almost unimaginable, that you could have anybody finding success in politics, for example, without at least convincing people that they were going to look out for the poor and the marginalized and the lonely. They have to at least convince people. Now, they might lie about it, and they might not actually do it, but they have to be. But if people don't actually think that this person is going to be concerned about common people, they don't have a chance. And we get that. See, when you became Caesar in the Roman Empire, it had nothing to do with whether you were going to care about common people or not. Nobody cared whether Caesar was going to look after the common people or not. Nobody cared. It never came up. And when you ran for the Roman Senate and you became a Roman senator, nobody voted voted for the senators who they thought were going to help the poor people or the common people. Nobody cared about the poor people, the common people. So it really was a different world. Now, I wanted to be somewhat cynical. I'd say, have things actually changed? I don't know. I suspect that things could be worse than they are now. But what has definitely changed is people have to at least go through the motions. They have to at least establish that, because still to this day, I can ask you, how do we feel today about, I think, kind of like I said about those two songs, I think we have a little bit of a mixed feeling about people who are wealthy, powerful. There are a few people, not very many, who actually just glorify, who just revel in letting everybody know how wealthy they are, and wanting to put their name on everything, and just trumpet their wealth and all that. That's actually, for the most part in American society, that's unseemly. For the most part. And if anything, people try to kind of like not let people know how much money they have. You might have more money than you have. It's considered unseemly. But again, there's the person with the brand new Porsche Jag or whatever. We've got that. But even then, that's kind of a little bit of a there are people who are a little bit outside our circle. They're like the celebrities or the folks on TV or something. But more often in our culture, there's still a little bit of you don't really want to know how much you have because it's not honor does not come from having more money than other people. It might come with what you do with it, what you do for other people. It doesn't just come. An example, which I'll just leave this with you, and you can think about it, is when people are thinking differently about something. We gather from the Gospels that one thing Jesus regularly did when he would come to a town is he would come to a village and he would have his disciples set up tables or something, or maybe blankets or something in the city's most visible part of the village, square, small villages, and he would have a banquet. Now we know they didn't have a lot of money and they didn't have a lot of food, so it's probably we think the banquet is a little bit of a pretend banquet. It's a little bit like it's like a tea party or something. But they did it. It was a parable banquet, and they had something, and he would invite the prostitutes of the village to the banquet. Because this is one of the things he gets criticized. The Pharisees are horrified by this, that he is eating with prostitutes. So, the prostitutes come, and it's the town square set up, and they're having a banquet. Jesus and his disciples with the prostitutes. The church actually has wondered about this for centuries, and from Augustine and everybody else, why did Jesus do this? And the usual answer is that prostitutes are obviously very immoral sinners, and he's trying to convert them. So it's evangelism. Jesus wants to convert the prostitutes, and then somewhere this legend comes up that Mary Magdalene, one of the prominent followers, was a former prostitute. That's, by the way, absolutely nowhere in the Bible. It never says Mary Magdalene had been a prostitute. She was a wealthy woman, and prostitutes, by definition, were wealthy. So that's rejected by scholars. But then the question is why? Why did he do this? Well, we've learned things in the past few decades. We have more knowledge of the Roman Empire than we ever had. We now know that between the conservative estimate is 1/4, more liberal 1/3. Between 1/4 and 1/3 of all people in the Roman Empire were slaves. That is the highest percentage of a population. If who have been enslaved at any time, any place in the history of the world. It's at the time of Jesus, between 1 out of every 4 people and 1 out of every 3 people were slaves. The number was higher among women than it was among men. And any female slave could be used as a prostitute. That probably means that in Galilee, in the world where Jesus lived, about 1 out of every 3 or 1 out of every 4 women were prostitutes. And they were all slaves. So whenever you hear, whenever you read anything in the Bible, in the New Testament about prostitutes, they're slaves. They could not repent. There is no reference anywhere in all of Roman literature to an ex-prostitute or a former prostitute. Such thing didn't exist. They were slaves. How did they become slaves? Debt slavery. The way it worked is a man, you have to grow enough food to feed your family. It's subsistence living. Everybody's poor. You grow enough food. Maybe you can sell a few things at the market, but mostly you're just growing to feed your family. You get 1 bad year, and you can't buy seed for next year. You have to grow enough to be able to eat now and have seed to plant next year. You have 1 bad year, and what do? Your family will starve, or you sell one of your children into slavery, and you sell the girls first. So it was very common in the Roman Empire for families, fathers, to sell their daughters into slavery. And those daughters, those girls, almost always ended up being prostitutes. When I was reading this and learning this, I was thinking a few things. I could go on. It's just horrifying information. I don't want to stun you out too much. But the oldest prostitute that we ever hear about in all of Roman literature, when it gives ages, is 18. We never hear of a prostitute over the age of 18. Though they started at puberty. Anytime from puberty on, you could be a prostitute. So they would buy younger girls and then just keep them until they reach puberty, and then they would be prostitutes. So it's sex slavery, sex trafficking. But why no one older than 18? First when I heard that, I thought, well, I guess, man likes young women. 18, what? Is 22 too old, or what? How perverted are? How perverted did men used to be? But no, it's not that. The answer is perhaps worse. They didn't live. They simply didn't live. A girl would become a prostitute at the age of 13, 14, and she would not live past her 18th birthday because diseases were rampant and they lived in the streets. It was a horrible and miserable life. So then I'm thinking, why did they need so many prostitutes in Galilee? Are these Jewish men? Are they supposed to be keeping the Torah? And I get that there be some, but we're talking hundreds. Why? Why would there be hundreds of prostitutes? Because this is a province, the edge, the border, the frontier of the Roman Empire, and it's where the troops are stationed. You had legions of Roman troops stationed there. So they need all the Jewish girls as prostitutes for the Roman soldiers. We actually didn't know these things until the past 25 years. Some of the data was there, we didn't know how to access it until we got better computer search engines. And people just weren't able to plow through it all. Now you can get all the Roman literature on the big on a network, and you can search for prostitute. You can find every reference everywhere. You could do that pretty recently. So we learned things. So now what the thinking is what Jesus did. Why did he do it? You go to the village? Because a banquet is how you honor people. It was the group. It's still today. You work for the company for 40 years, and then when you retire, they give you a banquet. You do something to give people a banquet. When 2 people get married, you have a banquet. And they sit at the head table with their attendants or something. You give banquets, and absolutely, you give a banquet. So Jesus and his disciples would go from little village to little village, and they'd set up their little pretend banquet in the city square and invite prostitutes to come to their banquet and honor them in the center of the square. Because whatever else people thought, Jesus was a holy man, and he was famous, and it was a really big deal when he came to town. So they knew that Jesus was coming to the little advance team, and that Jesus is coming to our little village, and the rabbi there already is talking about whether historians might be skeptical as to whether he worked miracles, but nobody else, and everybody thought he worked miracles. So here's this guy who has this extraordinary power of God. He's obviously a prophet, like we read about in the Bible, and he is absolutely the #1 celebrity of the day. And he's coming to our little podunk village of 500 people. And he would come there, and he would tell his disciples to set up tables and have for a big banquet, and they'd be waiting to see, who's going to be honored at the banquet. And that's, of course, they heard what he did, at the mass village, and he would invite the prostitutes to gather around and honor them. So what people would think is these girls have horrible, miserable lives. We're talking about relatively young teenage girls who've been sold into sex slavery by their families, who have horrible lives and are going to die young. And Jesus cannot do anything about that. Or at least, so his story would say. Unless he used his supernatural powers or something. Jesus cannot do anything about that. He can't change that social system. But what he does do is he honors them, the whole community, and because he is trying to change the way people think, so that the slave owners will be put to shame, and the slaves will be lifted up in honor. That's just one example of what today historians who are looking at Jesus are saying how he changed the political system of his day. He did it in a way that was either very astute and very sneaky, or maybe he just got lucky. Maybe he was just doing. We don't know how well he planned it out. Did he actually have a plan, or was he just doing what intuitively seemed like a good idea to him, and pieces fell into place? They don't know. We don't have enough data, but they are saying whatever, and for whatever reason, it was highly effective because within a relatively short period of time, the value system changed, and though all kinds of evil remained, by the time the Roman Empire was officially Christian, sex trafficking and sex slavery was at least officially illegal. And no longer condemned. And at the very least, anybody who engaged in it, either as a trafficker or as a client or whatever, would be viewed as a horrible and disgusting person. And nobody had thought that way. A mere 300 years earlier. So he changed the value system of an empire, and ultimately of work. What would people have thought of those teenage girls who were prostitutes? Is that they or their father, they were cursed by God, or their father was, or whatever. Because rich people are rich because God has favored them. This is what religious people would have thought. Secular Roman people really didn't care. The religious people would have thought people are rich because God has favored them. If you're poor, and if you're so poor that you have to sell your daughter to be a sex slave, it's because God has not favored you. I don't know why. You must have done something wrong. So you've not been favored by God. And so the girls that live in the gutters or in the alleys and are sex slaves of the Roman troops they got themselves into that somehow, or their parents did. Doesn't matter. But people did not feel sorry for them.
Well, thank you for all that. I mean, that was a beautiful way to end. So,
Thank you.